This is one of those episodes that will have a large impact on your reptile keeping. I feel like a lot of the episodes I record do have that, but some more so than others. And quite often it happens when we talk to somebody who has boots on the ground experience in the wild, looking and photographing the animals that we commonly keep in captivity. Today I'm talking to Daniel Solis, who is a former reptile breeder, a longtime reptile keeper. He's a wildlife photographer. He also created a company called Jungle Diaries, which would allow people to go on expeditions to different parts of the world to basically do herping and learn more about the species that we keep. And he now is the owner of, he and his wife own a lodge in Costa Rica called the Oropel Lodge, which again, basically is a place where you could just plop you in the middle of nature, in the middle of the edge of a rainforest, and allow you to go on excursions, which is either night herping or ziplining or water rafting, etc., etc., all the amazing things that you'd want to do if you were in Costa Rica. But the impact this episode will have is on those experiences that Daniel has connecting with nature and being surrounded by wildlife. He has some unbelievable insights on reticulated pythons, on anaconda keeping, this really mind-blowing experience he had with a wild Cribo while in, I'm forgetting at the moment what country he was in with the experience with the Cribos, so you'll hear that right away, and it's one of those things that'll just stand out in this episode. So if you are a reptile keeper or want to be one, this is a great episode for you, and especially if you're somebody who wants to have an experience a tropical rainforest firsthand and have a guide of somebody who's actually can walk you through the forest and find animals for you, then listen to this episode, because at the end we'll talk about the lodge that he and his wife have, and it might be something that you want to consider for a trip at some point in the future. Let's jump into this episode. Enjoy. This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. There are different styles of thermostat, on, off, or dimming. Personally, I much prefer a dimming thermostat because I run essentially all halogen heating in my reptile room, and I don't want those bulbs turning on and off to control temperature and stressing out the animal and strobing out all day. I would much rather the bulb either dim or increase in power to control the temperature, and that can only be done with a dimming thermostat. That's why I'm so excited to tell you more about a brand new product from Med, the ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. If you're interested in learning more about that, stick around through the rest of the episode and you'll find out more. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited. I always love to talk to people who have, we have a lot of either Europeans or Americans or Canadians on the podcast, and except for maybe the southern United States, a lot of people we're not surrounded by wildlife like you are if you grew up in Central or South America, and I know that's your background. So it brings another level of, I think, passion to reptile keeping and just wildlife and nature in general. So I would love for you to just give the listeners a little bit of a background. I know you grew up in El Salvador, I think. So why don't we start there? What was your childhood like, and what was your relationship with Mother Nature?
Yeah, so I was born in El Salvador. The experience, I guess, my first interaction with wildlife was pretty vivid in my memory. And I think it's because of the setup. But now that I think about it, even in other parts of the world, you still have that. I think we sometimes don't allow that to happen. So when I grew up in El Salvador, I often went out on the rivers, mountains, and I didn't know that at the time, but I was doing what we call herping. I was looking for animals. It seemed interesting, and my family and myself, we allowed that to happen, that connection. So I think it started early on in my life, and that pretty much shaped the rest of my life. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. I was next to, like I said, the rivers and the mountain range, and I often went out looking for iguanas, which it was my first pet, and I actually caught my pet. I think I was around 7 or 8 when I first caught one. Right after that, I thought it was cool, so I caught a basilisk, the green basilisk, and I think I was hooked.
So you were basically able to wild catch your animals, and then you were keeping them as pets as a young boy. So you started early.
Yes, yes. I think in the industry of reptile keeping and just the animals in general, everybody had a similar encounter, where at some point early in their lives, they had a very significant experience. And it seems that everybody shares somewhat of a similar story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Those early years of your development, whether it's like a certain species that catches your eye as a kid, quite often that's what people's dream species ends up being later on. You know, maybe they see a book and there's a picture of it on the cover, and it's just something that they connect with as like a 7 or 8 year old, and it stays with you. Or maybe they saw an animal at the zoo. Was there an animal or a species like that for you, or was it more so just the connection with going out into the wild and exploring that
Yeah,
you
I
remember?
think it was as a whole in nature. It was everything. The experience of seeing green or caves or rivers, lakes. I think everything was connected, and I think everybody has this desire to be connected to nature. I think it's something primal
Mhm.
that we're in tune with nature. Often in the States, especially, living in I live in Los Angeles for some time. You tend to lose that, so we forget that we actually feel a connection once we're out and about in national parks, in jungles, in other countries. To me, it was everything as a whole,
Mm.
and I think the reptile affinity developed a little later on in life, but that connection to nature, I can remember it from like I said, when I was 7 or 8.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I know that there's always this like level of peace or feeling of relaxation when you surround yourself with nature. And I remember we'll
Right,
talk more about Costa Rica later, but I've been to Costa Rica twice, and both times I would find when I go for a hike through the jungle, there's this weird, like it's almost like a weight lifted off your shoulder. I don't exactly
right,
know what it
right,
is, but
right.
it's just you feel so content. And not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's super happy about bugs and things flying around. But for me, it's just like it just is such a calming experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. I hear that a lot. And again, I don't know if we can say exactly what it is. My idea of it is it's something primal. It's something that we as species have, and maybe we forgot a little bit, but
Mm.
when we look back at it, it's still there. I think that's why some of the nature shows are so popular. Some of the documentaries are so popular. People still see it through a screen, but they still connect to it.
Yeah. And we'll double back to this because you have lots of experience bringing people on expeditions, and I'm sure you had some stories of people having those types of moments with you. But I'd like to stick on the reptile keeping for a second. So as you progress through your childhood, I know you got into breeding and keeping on a larger scale. Did you do that? I'd love to hear about what you were doing, like what you were breeding and keeping. But was that in El Salvador, or did you?
No, the
Okay.
the keeping the keeping. So then, when I was later on, I moved to New York, uh,
Mm.
in my early teens. I moved to New York. I lived there for about 2 years. Then I moved to LA, to California, and I lived there for pretty much the rest of my life. Um, I realized I was working, just realized that almost like if something was missing. Uh, I think it was that connection that I had, and I remember visiting some pet shops, and I immediately clicked. It clicked on me. It's like, whoa, it's this connection. And sure enough, just like everyone's story, you start with one, and then it progresses to be a little more addictive, and you get more and more and more. It was I think I got a Brazilian rainbow boa as a pet, and I thought it was so cool. So then, sure enough, the addiction started from there, um, into ball pythons, some boas. Uh, so that's how my breeding started. Mostly with ball pythons. I had some boas too. I think at one point I reached, I don't know, about 100 adult females, and was producing quite a few animals. From there, I added some reticulated pythons, and again I started producing a few hundred as well. I think at the height of it, anywhere from 500 babies to maybe 800 babies
Oh
a
wow.
year. Uh, if not, maybe a little bit more with the boas. Uh, but yeah, started with one animal, and it progressed into a full business.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty stark difference from probably being able to go explore the jungles of El Salvador to being in New York and then LA. Like you want to talk about the biggest metropolis, in this
Right.
area. Essentially, you're like
Hmm.
smack dab in the city. So I can imagine that you miss that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what it was when I went to this particular shop in LA, and I saw the animals, and I was just glued to the glass, just looking through, and I realized that I could have them as pet. And that it reminded me
Hmm.
of that feeling that you described of wow, it feels so cool and almost calming.
Hmm.
So I got hooked, and that's how the breeding started.
And then eventually you moved on from breeding. What was the? Did you just kind of get tired of it, grow out of it, or was what was the story there?
Well, yes, it can be a little complex, and the problem is you have to be honest with yourself because after breeding for a while, you start believing that you're doing it correctly, and you're keeping the animals correctly and with the best of care. So then, while I was keeping animals, I picked up a little bit of photography, especially wildlife photography, and it kind of things started to connect to each other. And I realized that I wanted to see some animals that I was keeping in captivity. I wanted to see them in the wild for multiple reasons. One, the curiosity, just the traveling, the explorer in me. And I think the second reason was to actually see uh, how they live in the wild and different, getting more ideas. One of the reasons was to improve my keeping. I just wasn't, it wasn't settling with me, that we were keeping them correctly.
Mm.
So I did a big push. I started traveling, and I went to the countries of the animals that I was keeping, like Indonesia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, um, even Africa. I went to Zimbabwe and try to experience and see it firsthand. Um, and I think that's when the realization started that perhaps the mass production of animals in captivity, in order to do that, you take away a lot of the, not that you cut corners, but in order to produce this mass amount of animals, you take away to what I believe is some necessities in captive breeding for animals. One of the examples is the space.
Hmm.
Keeping for mass production, you compromise on the space. And when I started traveling and seeing some of the species needing more space and traveling distances and having a larger range, I started to get a little uncomfortable, you know. And I did, when I was doing the breeding, there was a time in that where I was making decent money for what I was doing. And actually that funded my camera gear, my traveling, and even some retail shops that I was able to put together, me and my brothers. So I was doing really good financially, but then I started to get a little uncomfortable. And I think I really had to look into it and be a critic, and that eventually led to me to stop a little bit of the breeding and the mass production.
Hmm. That's a really hard thing for people to do, especially when you're making a living off it or making a good chunk of money off of it. It's easy to put the blinders on and just continue to do it. And I've talked to hundreds of people at this point. I don't think I've found one person who's experienced animals in the wild who hasn't come home from that and gone, okay, I need to make some changes here. This I think what you say, that level of discomfort hits you much harder when you see the animals like scooting across a plane or running up a tree or whatever it is, and then suddenly you come home to your small enclosure and you go, I'm not totally sure this is right. It doesn't mean we shouldn't keep them, but it means there needs to be some adjustments. And like you said, space is a big one. And it's really hard to ignore that experience that you have when you have boots on the ground in the wild.
Absolutely, man. It was really harsh on me. I was doing really good with the sales, and I had multiple outlets for my animals, and it was a pretty quick turnaround. I didn't struggle selling anything. Part of it is, having some healthy animals and photographing them well and understanding the market. But again, once I started traveling and seeing the animals in the wild, it definitely changed my mind, and it hits you so hard, because then I spent all these years breeding and doing what I did. I didn't work. I didn't have any regular job. So then I found myself starting from zero, because now it's a total change in my life. So it was quite difficult. But like you said, I also have noticed, and it has happened with me, where I bring people with me either to the property here or to the wildlife tours that I did before I started this project. And a lot of the people who came and experienced this with me change the ways of keeping reptiles, at least in their personal collection. And some of them even completely stopped keeping them in captivity and took on traveling or doing other things. But it's not a fight against keeping, because I think we have to find a compromise in the middle.
Yes.
I think keeping reptiles or pets in general creates, especially on kids, it creates a sense of responsibility, care, and compassion. And I think the world in general could use more of that. And I think when we allow kids to have pets and actually care for them, it creates that compassion, and it will translate to humans. It creates a better world. So to say that it's a campaign against keeping, it's not accurate either. I do believe in keeping pets. So even after experiencing them in the wild.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's super well said. Do you keep anything right now, or are you completely out of it?
My brother kept some of my animals that had a little bit of that. They've been with me for 12 years now, 15 years. So I couldn't sell them, man. I even though I'm not there taking care of them, I set them up my brother's place, and he's taking care of them for me. I told him he could breed them, and I've been helping him out with that, but he took over that part, and they're just there, which I like, because I know whenever I go back visit, I can still see them. It's a couple snakes, probably like maybe about six animals that I kept. Some of my females that I didn't want to get rid of.
Yeah, there's the sentimental value. You can't move them on.
Yeah, and here in Costa Rica, I can't keep anything. It's illegal for any wildlife. For domestic pets, you can, but I don't keep anything. Honestly, it only takes me about 20 minutes that way. This is my house. It takes me 20 minutes starting to that jungle, and I'll find any snake or any frog or anything.
Yeah,
and
you don't need it.
Yeah, it's almost like a big terrarium. It's about 50 acres that what we have here, and next to it, it's 700 hectares. So that's like 1,400 acres of connected forest. So I have plenty of animals in there.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I want to dig into that at some point too, because I absolutely love the wildlife in Costa Rica. But before we move on from the photography, are there any places or locations or species that you've experienced or shot with the camera that that are memorable for you, that kind of stand out as your photographing career? The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the BioDudes Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other BioDudes substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the BioDudes Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients crops like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The BioDude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpeticulture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name.
Yeah. So when I was doing the wildlife tours, taking people to other countries to see animals, and that included Costa Rica too, I used to keep a lot of what we call super dwarf retics. It's a subspecies of the mainlands, of the bigger ones that you see. At that point, nobody had gone there to photograph them, to those little islands, and I can see why. It's quite difficult to get there, and it takes 24 hours on a either cargo boat or a ferry that only goes there once a week. So when you go there, you have to stay there at least a week. Mm. So I saw how difficult it was, and me being to the expedition, so I put together an expedition to go there to photograph them. Most people who writes books and the natural history of those particular animals, including the husbandry in the States, have never been there. They go by either locals telling them stories or Google Maps seeing the temperature range, and there's some books written about it, but people have never been there. So I was like, I want to go there, see it firsthand, and experience that. So that trip there, that expedition, being the first time, was one of the most memorable because it took so much energy from me, so much money, but I got there and I did take my images, and I think to this day that was still one of the best trips I've done.
Were the snakes hard to find?
The snakes once in there wasn't too hard. I figured it out quite easily. The first two nights, actually no, the first 3 or 4 nights I couldn't find them. I was looking in the trees because we believed that they were eating birds, and I was looking in the trees every day, morning, night, nothing. But it didn't make sense because it's like they. So we figured to go check a cave system that we had discovered earlier. I realized that around 6:30 or 7, the bats come out of the cave. We went at that time to see the bats. When I came to the cave system, the first thing I saw was a hanging snake. And it was a super dwarf hanging from a ledge, waiting for the bats to go by to catch him. Okay. I realized then that the main diet for these species of snakes is bats. It's not birds. It's bats. It's bats, and there's some wild mice too. They may also eat. I don't know, but based on what I saw, it kind of leads me to believe that they could potentially eat geckos and other lizards too when they're babies. But for the most part, they're catching bats.
Wow. Many people have heard the bat, like, at the entrance of the cage, the snake snagging them as they leave the roost. So did that mostly come from that expedition, that information?
I believe so. Now with the super dwarf, a lot of the information I did share it online freely, posts, pictures on my pages. So at least with those, we now know that it's mostly bats. And then I took 2 more expeditions there after that, and he checked out the populations living in the caves. They're not spread out in the island. You won't find them on the trees. You hardly ever do. I think out of 30 animals that I found overall, well, I found more. Probably 2, maybe 3 animals I found on the trees.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, sometimes they wander off from the cave, but it seems that they learn. They get shelter from the heat because it's very hot. They get shelter from the heat. They get water. It seeps through the rocks and it puddles up at the bottom, and they get food. It's off the ground because they do have predators. And we realize that that's where these populations are living. So that to me was one of the most incredible expeditions that I've done.
Yeah, and what a great piece of information to bring back. Was there anything else about their care that you also feel like that when you're not quite
Absolutely,
doing
everything.
right?
I mean, everything. I remember. So I started keeping super dwarfs about 12 years ago. No, maybe more now. Close to 15 years ago. And if you look hard enough, you still find some of the literature that says 90 degrees, and we're cooking the animals. The in that those temperatures, we look at the Google map or weather system there, and it truly reads 90 degrees. It is true; those islands are very hot, but we fail to think there's microclimates in that island, as small as they are. Once you go on the caves, it drops by 10 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized at that time we were keeping them way too hot. Those animals before, now it has changed. It's a lot better. But before, I remember a lot of animals having issues with their nose pushing up and
Yep.
and being messed up from the face. That's animals stress out because they're pushing cages to get out of the heat.
Right.
So first thing I realized is these animals are 75 degrees, 80 degrees. They're not 90. They're not staying in the 90 degrees. Another interesting thing is in the morning they do best. They do come out around the caves, and it's not when we say basking, we think a bearded dragon basking under the sun. I think it has a name, almost like a cryptic basking.
Yeah, cryptic
I think.
basking. Yeah.
Yeah, so they come out through the leaves, they bask a little bit, they do get sun, and then they go away. So it's not a direct sunlight, and they do it early in the morning. So that was one of the biggest things that I noticed, that the temperature, it's off. It was off. Now people have changed that. Same with the incubation. The temperature in the incubator areas where they have the eggs was 85, 80, 83. I remember reading before in literature, incubation is 89
Mm-hmm.
or even 90. That's not what I saw. So that information was definitely useful for me. After that particular expedition, that year I did way better in my breedings, and just by adjusting a few things.
Yeah. We can be very misled by the weather reading. You just type in the who like, is that thermometer at the airport, at a tarmac where it's just getting roasted all the time. It's not where the snake is.
Mm-hmm. In general, with the retics, I've seen them in multiple islands now, in Borneo, Java, Bali, all the super dwarf islands. There's 5 islands. I've seen them in Kayuwari, in Jampia, in Salayer. And my conclusion was, we're keeping them way too hot. We were definitely stressing them out, and it was unnecessary.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would love to know a little bit more about the expeditions. I think that, like, you're not doing expeditions anymore. Now you have the hotel. We'll talk about the hotel a little bit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can. I try, but the logistics of living this place, it's more difficult. First of all, Costa Rica doesn't have all the destinations that I had for Indonesia. So I have to fly back home, and from there, which is 6 hours, and then from there go 20 hours, and it's just the logistics. It's not feasible anymore. On top of that, we're still building here, and I have to be present for that. So what I did was I stopped the expeditions. I only do the expeditions here in Costa Rica. So we get a lot of people that come here, stay in our property. We go in the jungle and we go look for animals, photograph stuff, and we do it that way. So the international expeditions for now, I had to stop them. But I did have tours in Peru, Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, Ecuador, Indonesia, all of Indonesia, Africa. But for now, it's
there's a pause on it. Well, I think that's rightly so. You're building a great project there, and I definitely want to talk about the location you're sitting in, because I think that's what people will be super excited about. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the past expeditions. Like, you've just mentioned some really great locations. What are like what type of people would come on those expeditions? Are those just sort of very adventurous, intense people?
Yeah, well, actually, no. The way I set it up was a lot of people in the industry, since that's what I worked at, right? When I was bringing reptiles, started to see my posts, pictures, and I would start telling them stories of the travels. And the people who was interested is keepers. At least for me, my experience was keepers that wanted to see, that wanted to experience what it's like for the animals that they're keeping in captivity, right, in the wild. So it was people that had a little bit of that curiosity already. So it was easy for me. I was able to get customers right away because everybody wanted to experience them. I had some people go to Colombia with me. We went to look for the terribilis, the little dart frog, the poison dart frog, uh, one of the most venomous. Well, it's poisonous. They create a poison when they're eating a specific ant and
Yeah, it's like
insect.
terribilis or something.
Yeah. So I did an expedition to go look for all those frogs, and everybody that went was frog keepers.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to see it in real life, and we did pretty good. So at that time in Colombia, Colombia just opened up to the tourism. There's always been tourism in Colombia, but recently it got better. When I did it, I think I did the first one 7 years ago or 8 years ago. It was quite tricky. We there was still a lot of conflict, and we did an area that was pretty heavy on guerrilla warfare, and we had a little encounter, and after that we stopped Colombia for a while. So yeah, when you do these things, you're bound to have it's bound to lead you into some instances where it gets a little hairy. We had they knew that we were there. We had asked beforehand, but they came, and it was a group of 3 or 4 people, and you can tell when they're not military because they have boots that don't match. They have gear that don't match, and they don't have any uniform. So they came to our lodge and they talked to the owner, and they wanted to get a little bit more out of it. Fortunately, it didn't escalate. We had a little plan to exit if something was to happen. Uh, but it was a pretty interesting experience in Colombia.
Interesting as interesting as dart frogs are, encountering militia in the middle of the jungle is probably not super
right.
on the top of the list.
Yeah. We were in the Chocó area, an area that's called Nuki, and that mountain range, it's untouched. You don't get there by driving. You got to take a small airplane to the coast. And at that time, the FARC guerrillas were controlling that area, and they sometimes ask for help to the lodge owners, or if you have a store, you're bound to pay a little bit of a fee. So we were there that day where they went to collect, and seeing all of us with camera gear, and I think they got a little excited. But those nothing happened out of that. We were safe. We finished our tour.
Yeah. Well, that's that's definitely a scary situation. Are there any other expeditions that you found where you were maybe finding animals that people were keeping in captivity that sort of changed their perspective, or anything that stands out as far as any of those other locations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Almost every animal, man. Almost every animal, which sucks. Again, because I'm also a keeper, and to have that realization, it hits you hard. One of them that is very memorable is a Drymericon bicolor, the one in Ecuador. I saw it in the Amazon in Ecuador. So we went to this lodge. We're gonna go herping, photograph stuff. The people at the lodge have told me down the path there's a pond. we see a snake there every day. It always crosses in the afternoon or in the morning. And I'm like, all right, what kind is it, or how is it? Oh, it's big and it's black and orange. I'm like, all right. So we pretty much had an idea that it was a Drymaricon. Indigo, no.
A Cribo.
What's the common name? A Cribo. So we knew that it was a Cribo. And sure enough, in the afternoon, we're sitting around lunching, and one of the workers goes, "Hey, the snake is back." It was a large female, probably like 7 feet. So we chased it. We were able to grab it, and sure enough, we let it go. We photographed it, let it go. We kind of just held it to photograph it, let it go. And the next day, it did the same loop. I realized that Cribos have a range. They know their area. We did a drone shot of the snake living through the water. Then I realized that the range that this animal had, it's huge. Mm. We're talking about, I don't know what distance I can give you, but what reference I can give you. But he had a small pond in the middle. I don't know, just like a parking lot. Mm-hmm. So the area that this snake it's patrolling, there's no way we can keep anything in captivity that can even come close to that size.
It's like a football field or something.
It's like, okay, there you go. It's a football field. In the middle, there's a pond. This snake knows every part of that area, and he lives there. He hunts, he breeds, he moves, he knows where to go, and it's about a football field. Mm-hmm. And back at home, and again, it doesn't help me criticize anybody, but I remember in literature suggesting that a 6-foot cage, it's enough for a Cribo. There's no way. That animal moves so fast in the wild. He knows where the area of the pond has frogs at a specific time of the year, the seasons. He knows what area is dry. He knows where to hide. He knows everything. That to me probably was an eye opener, because I realized that the snake, at least Cribo in this case, require something that we couldn't replicate in captivity.
Yeah, even at a zoo, it wouldn't make sense.
Exactly. So that's pretty tough. And then people argue, well, they breed, they seem healthy. Yeah, it works. It works, definitely works. I just don't know if they're thriving. They're living, but I think the lack of this stimulating setup has to do something psychologically for snakes and reptiles.
Yeah, you're talking about a fast-moving, intelligent, powerful colubrid. It's
one of the most intelligent ones.
Yeah.
So then that led me to not keep indigos or Cribos. I seeing that, it's like, I don't think we can replicate that.
Well, an exercise that I always have the listeners do when I talk to someone like yourself, and so the regular listeners will remember this one, but I always say, if you're in a place like that, where you're in the rainforest, the jungle, just imagine that you can even pace out your 2x6 enclosure, and just, put a backpack in the corners and just see how big that looks. It looks big when you're in your bedroom because it takes up a big chunk of your room. But when you're outside in the middle of nature, it's this tiny little thing. You not even a stick that's on the ground would fit in it. It's almost impossible to imagine that being the size of your enclosure. So when you put it in that frame, you realize, oh my gosh, that is still so small, even though we'd consider like a 6-foot enclosure quite large. It's like you said, I think you summarized it perfectly. It kind of sucks when you learn that the hard way,
Yeah, that realization to me was hard, and that's what led me to this. I stopped the breeding, and focused more on showing people nature out there, and letting them choose whatever they want to do after that. It's been successful. A lot of people have changed the way they keep animals and be a little more conscious with the size. Even now, I see a push, at least in my community, in retic keeping, people doing a push with more naturalistic setups, okay, not just newspaper and a ball of water, but the usage of branches. Some of these animals spend more time up in either a rock wall in a cave or branches. They don't even sit on the floor. I realized that in Indonesia, a lot of the retics, the super dwarf, they have a predator there. There's a large water monitor that lives in that island. It's and it's hunting. It's actively hunting for anything that falls on the ground. The snakes don't even touch the ground. They stay up. They stay up high on walls, and they have a different muscle field. They're not fat. And you know where else I saw that too? And again, it's I'm not picking on any particular keeper but I saw that on anacondas. Anacondas spend most of their life in floating islands, in water, or soft, squishy foliage or grasses. I don't remember seeing a large anaconda in solid ground. They don't. We keep them in cages that are solid. I don't know. I don't know if there's any study done. I don't think there is. But I don't know if that's the healthiest. I think we're putting pressure on their lungs. I think we're putting pressure on their stomach and maybe other organs. And we don't realize it because they're so heavy. Every time that I found large females, it's been on grass that's soft and floating. We call it floating islands. Or marshy areas where they can float in the water a little bit. That's another thing that make me not want to keep anacondas in captivity. The amount of space of just the water that it will take, not every keeper can provide that.
Yeah. I remember this moment years ago with my Brazilian rainbow boa. I had just added this kind of giant pond for her to soak in. Like, you know, she always had a large water dish that she could fit in, but this was a much larger thing for basically almost like an aquarium in her cage. And you can actually see it just over my shoulder here with those plants coming out. And I remember like maybe a couple of days after I had her in that new enclosure with the pond, I fed her. And then I look behind me, and once she swallowed the rat, she's going into the pond to soak. And she spent a couple of days in there. And it made me think exactly that. Like, there's something in her that's programmed to go in the water. And you know, obviously, rainbow boas and anaconda are quite closely related. That's probably a programmed thing. Yeah, exactly. They're alleviating the pain or the pressure and the weight off their body by just floating. And it made perfect sense. Yeah.
And we realize these things by observing animals being out in the wild, right? Or having them in captivity. The problem is that I scientifically cannot say that this is happening, but I can see it with a little common sense. But now I would like for some breeders to consider other, you know, options and potentially when they're selling babies, tell them, hey, babies seem to thrive in water, provide a bigger water area so they can digest properly. Again, I don't know how much we're hurting these animals in captivity by not keeping them correctly. They're living for sure, they're alive, but I don't know if they're thriving, and that's what gets to me, and that's why I stopped some of the breedings.
If you're using halogen bulbs as a heat source, then the last thing you want to use is an on-off thermostat, because then you'll actually flick the bulb off when the temperature is too high, and that's a distraction and an annoyance to your animal. It is much better and much preferred to use a dimming thermostat. That's why I want to tell you about Zoomed's new product, the ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. This is a high accuracy dimming temperature control for your pet's habitat. It has both a daytime and a nighttime setting, so you could also use it to control something that's a non-light emitting heat source like a heat pad or a ceramic heat emitter or a heat projector. It has an adjustable ramp up and ramp down period for gradual temperature changes. And for me, I'm all about simulating sunrise, so you can slowly bring temperatures up. It is much more natural than just turning the heat on in one fell swoop. It has a sleek, low-profile housing as well as a battery backup, so you don't lose any of your data or your inputs on power interruptions. If you're someone who's striving to continue to replicate nature in its most natural form, then you need to have the ability to ramp your heat on and ramp your heat off. Turning things on and off aggressively is a lot for the animal to handle. It is much more natural for things to come up and off in a slow, gradual pace, just like Mother Nature. So if you're looking for something that can control your temperature in a much more accurate and fine-tuned way, make sure you check out ZooMed's new ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. For more information on this or any other ZooMed product, make sure you head to zoomed.com or check out the link in the show notes or the YouTube description. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And like you said, you're not trying to point fingers at anybody because we're all kind of in this situation learning it as we go. From all your experience of being in the wild, is there any species that you've encountered that you think this is actually a good animal for captivity? Like maybe, I don't know if there's like maybe some smaller species or things.
I think every animal can potentially be kept. What the problem is how much are you willing to invest in it or how much effort you got to put in it. I think almost every reptile, maybe some sea turtles, they do cover vast areas, but for the most part, I think it all depends on the level of expertise you have. So what I would say is that maybe we look at the animal that could be replicated, that can be set up easier than I would say some of the smaller geckos, some of the smaller snakes. Those animals are less, oh man, but the list is big. Yeah, some of the geckos, crested geckos, for example, day geckos, even though they move up and down in big trees, I've seen some setups that are very realistic and it works. Even reticulated pythons, you just have to understand though the space requirement. I bred both the larger ones. I had 18 foot animals, and it's deceiving because you can see them curl up in a corner and they're not using the whole cage. But in the wild, even large animals will move very long distances, go up on a tree, go down, and have a level of activity that a small cage cannot give. So if you understand that potentially you can keep an animal indoor for a little bit in a cage, but having an outside gym, have a pond that they can go out to and have the liberty of basking, because a lot of the retics do bask. They bask. The mainlands will come out and bask a little bit more in the open than super dwarf. It might be because they're bigger and they don't have that many predators. So if you can provide that, and you have prior experience with large constrictors, I wouldn't see an issue keeping larger animals. So I think it has to do with the level of experience and the willingness you have to find that compromise. So almost every reptile can be kept, but you have to understand and be honest with yourself. I cannot give all this to this animal. Perhaps that's not the right animal for you to keep.
Yeah, I think that's
so
good.
So I don't know if there's one animal that, even ball pythons, that at one point we consider is the easiest one to keep. What I believe is the ball pythons are the most resilient animal, and they can survive cold weather, too hot, too cold, no water, or I think that's we believe that's what makes it a good pet. But I think it's an animal that's resilient and it's not dying that easily. And we think, oh yeah, that's a good one to keep, but even they require a level of care that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a well put. It comes down to space requirements and investment in money. And if you don't have a lot of money or space, then definitely gravitate towards something on the smaller end, and then you can do something larger. So I'd love to talk about your project where you're sitting right now. So you're in Costa Rica. You have a lodge there. First, what made you choose to do this in Costa Rica?
So we were doing wildlife tours to all these countries already. I had come here 8 years in a row, twice a year with groups, and Costa Rica has always been. It's one of the safest countries that we have. So in Central America, so it's always had a good reputation, and it has the wildlife. People here do care, and they're very conscious about it. Multiple reasons. It's now a culture of caring for wildlife, but it started because it was producing money through tourism. So taking care of the animals was a good investment, and that became culture. Now everybody's conscious. It still has its issues, but more than any other country that I've been to.
Yeah,
So
you don't see like a lot of garbage and things. Like they're always good about like
yeah,
making sure things look clean and the nature's not being
right,
disturbed.
right. Man, I've seen people when somebody throws trash on the floor, they go pick it up and they give it back to him.
Yeah.
They're very conscious about it. So I like that because um, early on I said once you have this connection with nature and you have this humanity, you get that early on by having either a pet or being around nature. I said that once you let kids be responsible for a pet or they tend to be, I don't know, almost more sociable, more caring. That translates to people.
Mm.
It translates to being caring for other people. I think this country did that. Now that they care for their animals, they care for nature, they seem to be more loving towards each other, creating a sense of peace. A country that doesn't have military, you know, it says a lot that they can still be okay and have this morality. I think it's because it has this sense of caring for nature from early on, and it transferred to human to other people. So I saw that. I saw that they're very caring for one another. Again, still issues. There's still people angry, but more. I see more peace here than any other country around.
Mm. That's
And
fascinating.
and I think it's for that connection that I was talking about early on. They have that connection with nature of caring, and they create this compassion, and that compassion then transfer to one another, creates a more harmonious way of living, and it's visible.
Yeah.
I think that has to do with why people here live 100 years.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I remember one time
Yeah.
I was there and my friends and I hired somebody to help teach us to surf. And like later that night, he invited us over to his house and they're having this big party and they're eating all this amazing food. And we're like, we just met you like a couple of hours ago and they're treating us as if we're best friends. And they
Yeah.
toured us around and this is just an incredible experience. And they're just very hospitable there and welcoming.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So when I came here, I saw that. I immediately was hooked. So because of that, I started meeting more people that became more friends, and I didn't get that in other countries. I do have very good friends in Mexico and Colombia, but here was more than just something quick. It was something that lasted for a few years. And by meeting more people, since they were so much sociable and caring, I met the owner of this land, the one I got it from, and he was so excited about talking about my project of wildlife and photography. And he was like, "Yeah, man, if you want to get it, let's work something out." And it just became the spot. He had everything that I was looking for. It's next to a pretty big reserve. It's secluded enough, but close enough. We have a little town here, not far, and it's only 2 hours from San Jose, so it's not too bad. And we're only 2 hours from the beach, so we have both worlds for us. So it made sense, and I was like, "This is it," and started working towards it. That was about 4 years ago. Um, I stopped some of the breeding by then, and that's about 2 years ago. I reconnected with my high school sweetheart, and I told her about the project, and she goes, "I'm in. Let's do it." And that was the final push I needed, because coming here to a different country and doing the push, it's quite difficult when you're by yourself.
For sure.
As adventurous as I was, and I had experience in business before, but still takes some courage. So I told her, and she was on board and kind of agreed. So then I was like, all right, then there's no backing out. We moved. We moved and started working from. We had nothing. This property had no construction
So the
whatsoever.
structure you're in now wasn't there.
No, nothing. It had zero. It was just an empty lot. It had some brush that we had to clear. Keeping it very ecological, I didn't cut any tree. We only harvest whatever was on the floor, and we worked around the trees that were in the property and the features. But there was nothing here. So far, we were able to build the main house, a bungalow, and another little house for rental. Uh, we're in the process of building another bungalow, the restaurant, and the pools. Um,
Wow.
but since we were able to get a few the bungalows and the house ready, we're starting to accept people, uh, to welcome customers, and it's been working out. Uh, we set up a few activities for them to do during the day, like rafting, zip lines. There's a lot of local tours because this area is becoming more popular in the tourism department. So, and then we offer the night walks, which is my expertise, and bird watching because this area is in the path of a massive migration path for wild birds. Um, so yeah, we're pretty much open now, but we still have a lot more construction to do.
So what's the experience that people have? They'll come, they'll rent it for a couple of nights, and like you said, there's some excursions and things. Are these people that want to? Are they quite often people that like to go basically herping or adventures, or do you have kind of a mix of things?
We're getting for Costa Rica. You know that you're gonna have a wild side of it. So we're getting people that already have that notion in their heads. They don't come here like it's not Italy where you're gonna be in town, roam. They know that they're gonna encounter monkeys. They know they're gonna encounter snakes. So there's already a filter there. The country already set it up for that. When you go to Costa Rica, you're gonna go to the beaches, surf, and usually the jungle is right there. So you know that already. It's already a given. So people who come here already are prompt for my suggestion, where it's like, I'll take you out to the jungle. We can go find some animals, photograph some animals, some reptiles, some frogs, and they're always saying yes, we want to do it. So it's already pre-screened for us. It's been easy. They like that. One of the bungalows. It's right next to that jungle that you see back there. It's like literally right there. So the monkeys come in and you can see him, and it's up high, so it has a view. And birds, monkeys, sloth. The toucans are singing there now, so they're into that already. So for us, it's easy. We just open the doors and they come.
Yeah, that's one of the, I think, most unique experiences about Costa Rica is that, especially if you live in more of a city, as soon as you're there and you're outside of like San Jose, you're immediately confronted with wildlife. It's not, you don't even have to look for it. Like the monkeys are there, the toucans are there. It's just part of the experience of being in Costa Rica. I mean, you need an expert to maybe get you to see some reptiles more beyond like a basilisk or something, but still it's not, you don't have to go deep into the woods to find these things. It's just right on the surface.
Right. So that's why part of the reasons why I picked Costa Rica, being one of the safest countries in Central America. Then the people, that compassion they have for one another, the love, they have a saying here. It's called "pura vida," which means just living life and being grateful for everything. They use that phrase for everything: to say hi, to say bye, to say welcome, to say thank you. But it's a way of living, and I truly believe that happened because they start caring about their wildlife and nature. Again, talking about that compassion that you get when you're having a pet, especially early on. In this country, is a proof of that.
Yeah, I think that's such a fascinating insight, and I think too, like even if people are listening and they're reptile keepers and they want to experience the wild side of what they keep, even if you don't keep things that are native to Costa Rica, it still seems to me that you can still learn so much from being in a tropical rainforest, because you'll learn about humidity and how wet the floor is and what the leaf litter looks like. It doesn't matter if it's an Indonesian species. The experience of being in a tropical jungle is so, I shouldn't say it's so similar, but there are similar aspects that you can pull from that would help you in your care, that just seeing a snake that isn't native, or seeing a snake that you don't keep in Costa Rica will help you keep your snake better.
Yeah, it will help you understand so many things, and hopefully, well, this is one of the reasons why we I was looking into your podcast because I see some of the questions that you're proposing. They can be controversial, you know, and some of the ideas I can see people fighting, but also listening at the same time. Like, should we keep this animal? Is this the correct way of keeping? Some of those questions are tricky because it touches you, you know, it challenges your belief. And everybody has their own belief. And when that happens, you get a little bit of pushback. And I think this was the right podcast to portray that, hey, I did it. I was a breeder. We was producing a lot of animals. I understand it completely. But here I am. You know, being honest to yourself is the hardest. Here I
Mhm.
am saying that there's other options out there. And I'm not saying stop breeding, but you'll learn more if you're open to it, if you're open to other options and other possibilities of keeping animals. I even think it's valuable business wise to say, hey, I've been there. I know how to keep them, or at least I understand better because I've been there. My species is this. This is how I see them in the wild. This is what we can do to improve. I
Mhm.
think it adds value to your breeding when you do that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a place of, like you said, it's a non-judgment because you were there. You were doing you were doing the mass production. You've been there, and it's not about saying, "Hey, this is not right." It's just saying, "Hey, these are some elements that you could potentially mix into what you're doing now that will give you more success and allow the animals to live healthier, more robust
Hmm.
lives."
Huge business opportunity too. Just look at your background.
Mm-hmm.
Not long ago, we didn't care for the naturalistic look. So now you have companies that are building uh, fake backgrounds that look realistic, branches, plant business. Now there's a a connection between plants and reptile keeping, which it wasn't that strong years ago. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't even have it. It wasn't a thing that you could put live plants inside. So there's this change creates an opportunity in business. So I really like the way you are making this asking these questions and showing these different ways of keeping and tell them, hey, is this right for you, or
Mm-hmm.
are we keeping them wrong? It's a good push up. So I wanted to say that that I like what you're doing and I appreciate it because it helps other people to get their brain going and change for the positive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that as well. And without people like you who have the experience, the podcast wouldn't exist. So it's I think it's a good partnership. Are there some animal experiences you've had on your property that are noteworthy? Like not just reptile, but I know that there's some larger mammals or some monkeys. Like, do you have to deal with that being so
Um,
remote?
yeah, so coming here, I had a really good idea of producing my own eggs, meat. I do have a lot of fruit trees and some vegetables that I'm growing. Bless my heart. So I got some chickens. I got about 10, and they were doing really good until so until the wildlife realized that I had them here. They didn't last long after that. I had a couple encounters with cats, wild cats. There was an ocelot that took a couple, and then they had babies. My chickens had babies. We were happy, and then one owl realized that we had them. So early on in the morning, she would come and grab one, and then a hawk realized that we had them. So I don't have any anymore. So the jungle took them.
Yeah.
So there's that. Being so close to a jungle, there's that. The other one is any vegetable, any fruit that grows on the ground, it will be eaten. There's just unless I enclose them in a greenhouse, anything that's out, it will be eaten. Right now, I have a papaya tree, and I have to cut the papayas early because if they get a little bit of the yellow, there's a bird that knows and goes and peck at them, and in one day is gone. I leave some for it, so he eats, but I cut them early and I let them ripen inside the house, or else I won't have any. The coconuts get eaten by squirrels, and it's like that. So you just got to learn how to share a little bit.
Yeah, you got to share with Mother Nature. That's the only way to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. We had a couple. Yeah, mostly it was the animals eating the chickens. That was pretty harsh. I didn't want to confine them in. I wanted the natural yard chickens, right? So they can forage, but it didn't work. It didn't last long. And then we had a snake that came in and tried to grab some. And it's fair. It's fair. We're right here, so it's fair, you know.
Yeah, that's the
So
experience.
now I don't have chickens anymore. I gotta go to town and buy chicken and eggs.
And what about the other thing I saw on your website that I think is interesting, because that was another experience that I related to having been in Costa Rica, is the dogs. And I see two dogs running around behind you at one point earlier in our conversation. So can you tell us kind of the project of working with dogs and maybe the situation in Costa Rica?
So yeah, my wife she really has an affinity with dogs, and she's very good at it. And she proposed a push to change the mentality a little bit. Although Costa Ricans already are very caring, you still have instances where the dogs is not a priority. And I'm not saying it should be, but we should have a balance. So then we started a book for children, a coloring book, just to give them an idea on how the dogs also get hungry, they get cold, they get wet, they get uncomfortable. So we've been pushing for that here, and at the same time, in occasions we help a local rescue with dogs. When we first got this property, I don't know why, there's a dog that showed up and never left. Her name is Fernanda, and I never kicked her out. She's cool. And now that was our first dog. She decided to show up and never leave. And then a second dog showed up, and now we have 4.
They keep coming up.
All from the street. But I put a stop to that. No more. 4 is enough, or else we'll have more here. But
there's a lot of stray dogs, right? The Costa Rica
there
has
is
an issue with that.
And it's funny because, man, it's just different cultures. A lot of them have homes and have owners, but they think it's cruel to keep them indoor or in kennels. So they let them out so they can go have fun and whatever. But then you have issues like an animal can grab them, they can get run over, and they stay more time on the street. So it appears that they're stray dogs. Don't get me wrong, there is some, just like in the States. So what I did was, hey, I have one particular dog that I don't like that she goes out because she goes in the jungle and she's small and she can be hurt. So I did a run, and it's pretty big. It's not small at all. It's not like a kennel. It's big. It's a big area. And I even did a hole on the door on the wall that goes from the outside run to an inside kennel, and it's big. You can walk into it. It's pretty big. And some of the guys that help me work here, they're like, "Oh man, I feel bad for her. You should let her out." And when I propose that keeping them indoors saves them, they don't get it. So a lot of people here keep the dogs out, just loose on the streets, and again, different culture. So they tell me that it's almost animal abuse, keeping them inside secure. So you have to deal with that too and understand it. But once you understand it, you can go about it a little bit better. So when you see a lot of dogs on the street, they usually have an owner, and they usually go back to a house. Very rarely you see one that doesn't have one. But people leave them out. So you have to change that perspective that, hey, perhaps keeping a dog indoor is safer for the dog and for everybody too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never would have thought of that.
Right. So, but imagine changing that culture. You can do it out of one day. So little by little, we do our part. We tell people that sometimes keeping dogs outside they can be run over or an animal can grab them. So there's a push for that on our part. We do what we can. So far, we rescued 4 dogs. And we're always there trying to help out a little bit.
Yeah. I kind of remember being sort of chased by like a pack of dogs when I was in Costa Rica. And at the time I thought they were strays, but you're probably right. They probably were just owners or probably lived in that area. But my friend and I were like, there's a bunch of dogs, and then you start running and then they just start chasing you because that's sort of what dogs do. And you think like, are these guys going to get us? They didn't do anything, but it is a safety risk even for people walking by. But just to have the difference in perspective where they actually think keeping a dog inside and in an enclosed space outside is cruel. It's kind of funny the way, like you said, different cultures.
And there's some sense to it too.
For
Again,
sure.
with the space of requirements for animals, dogs do run a lot.
Yes.
You know, if I mean, if you go back, dogs are descendants from wolves. Um, Same species. They have kept. Some of the wolves will walk for 3 days without stopping.
Yes.
Just keep walking, chasing for 3 days, 4 days without stopping. You know the amount of stamina and just the fit for that. That still is a remnant on some of the breeds of dogs. I have one. I just don't know if I can ever put him in a kennel. The amount of laps that he does in this property, which the clearing part of this property is 5 acres. Um, it doesn't go in the jungle, but the clearing of the property is 5 acres. And this dog, his name is Joey, he walks so much around this property 3, 4 times a day. Then you think, man, keeping that indoors, it's not a possibility.
Hmm. Yeah, they
So,
need space.
so yeah. Again, with giving the proper space to the animals. So people now that they say, hey, maybe keeping them inside is a little bit cruel. There might be some truth to it. But
Yes.
changing dog keeping nowadays, it's very hard.
Yeah, I
But
know.
hopefully, some people can understand that. Hey, maybe my dog needs more walking outside. Let's take him out for a walk and find a enclosed area, a park for dogs. So that's always something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Daniel, you have a fascinating story. I'm just fascinated by this project in general. I think there's probably some people listening that will absolutely want to come down. Can you let everybody know how they can actually book a trip at your lodge?
Yeah. We I think we advertise through Airbnb or Booking.com, but honestly, it's so we're so small that I think the pure organic way of doing it, the best way will be contact me directly or through our pages. We always monitor our social media pages, and it's just a direct contact instead of just booking through a third party, through Instagram, Facebook, or me directly on Facebook. Um, we do have Oropel Lodge on Instagram and on Facebook and my page. I have my photography page, it's Jungle Diaries, and then my Facebook is my name. I think it's more real. Just message me, send me a message, and hey, I'm interested in coming over. I want to go herping, and then we can line up a small itinerary for you, and you can come stay with us. We go in the jungle and look for some wildlife.
Yeah, I think that's a dream trip for many people listening. Does the lodge have a website as well, or do they just from Jungle
Yeah,
Diaries
they
you can get
do.
there?
It's oropellodge.com.
Okay,
There's also a way to contact us through there.
okay, I'll make
So
sure all that's in
it's
the show notes, of course.
yeah. So there's a website and then the Instagram and Facebook. Yeah,
Okay,
that's probably the best way. Sending a direct messages so we can talk, and it's more personalized. It's more organic. I like it better.
cool. All right, well, I'll make sure all that's in the show notes for everybody. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up? It's okay if you don't have anything, but I always like to leave the guest an option to say.
Yeah, give yourself an opportunity to find the connection,
Mm.
the this primal connection that we have with nature. If you have kids, make sure you don't deny that either. Make sure you give them the chance to connect with nature. I truly believe every human in this world has the desire to connect. Sometimes it gets taken away by video games, by news, by CDs, even school. So at one point or another, give yourself a chance to connect and come out. And not specifically here. Just come out, man. The US, in the States, we have so many national parks.
Mhm.
Give yourself the chance to go out there, breathe in fresh air, look at some wildlife. Um, I think it creates that compassion that the world needs. And I think it creates that humanity that we, especially now with news and the wars that are going on, especially now, I think we need it more than ever. So, if you are listening, give yourself a chance, give your family a chance to connect, look at nature, and you'll find the balance.
Awesome. I think that is extremely, extremely well said. Daniel, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I'll have all your social media and everything in the show notes so people can go check you out and follow you on Instagram and reach out to you if they want to come stay at the lodge. So thank you so much for being here. I think the experiences of learning from what you've had with the wild herp experiences, as well as the last point you wrapped up on there, was perfect. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And again, I appreciate what you're doing, and keep the good job going. And I like your setup in the background.
Thank you very much.
So cool.
Thanks, man. All right, that is the end of this episode. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me and telling your stories. Again, like I said through the intro, there's just so much information to be extracted from somebody like you that, again, this is not a way to shame reptile keepers. Anybody looking behind me, I have a bunch of reptiles, but I think it's these experiences that people like Daniel have that allow us to go, okay, maybe there's some species we shouldn't keep in captivity, or at least if we are, we should be giving more space and more money investment, and even the smaller species probably deserve more space than we are often giving them. So hopefully this episode didn't depress you as a reptile keeper. Hopefully it excited you and invigorated you, and especially if you're somebody who wants to have that experience in the rainforest, consider checking out Oropel Lodge. Put it on your bucket list, because I think it would be something that would be absolutely mind-blowing, and you'd be able to learn so much from those experiences, especially from someone like Daniel, who has herping experience and photography experience all around different spots in the world. You can extract so much information from experiences like that. So, listeners, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, the best thing you can do is just share it on social media. Let's find some more people to listen to this episode, because again, I think it will impact everybody's reptile keeping substantially. If you'd like to support the episode or just the podcast production more, you can head to animalsathome.ca to pick up yourself a shirt or a sweater. $5 immediately gets donated to rainforest conservation, so that's another way you can also support the podcast and support conservation. You can also head to you can also head to patreon.com/animalsathome if you'd like to join us over on Patreon. There you have early access to ad-free episodes, and again, that just helps me keep the lights on in this room and keep the production going. And I think that is it for this one, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Liam Sinclair from Reptiles and Research for editing this episode, and I will see you in the next one.